Hello, good evening, everyone. Good evening. This is a big room and full of people, and thank you for everybody, especially those who are standing. Popular, exciting night. My name is Marcia Eli. I have the fun and joy of bringing these programs to you from the Center for Brooklyn History, along with my colleagues here at the center and all of my colleagues at the Brooklyn Public Library, which we are now a part of. Tonight, it is a joy to welcome back photographer Stanley Greenberg for an evening that celebrates our water system through the new and expanded edition of Stanley's book, Waterworks. Yeah. Waterworks is a marvel of a book, a comprehensive and gorgeous exploration of New York City's water supply and wastewater treatment systems. It was originally published in 2003. Stanley visited reservoirs, aqueducts, tunnels, gatehouses, sewer pumping stations, and every imaginable water-related site in the city, around the city, and throughout the watershed. The book, which is a piece of art in and of itself, is published by KGP Monolith, owned by Kris Graves, and it's available at the CBH shop, which you may have passed as you came in, and Stanley will be very happy to sign copies after the program. In a moment, I'm going to introduce Stanley and all of our other guests, but first I want to give a huge shout out to our fantastic program partners, Open House New York. Thank you. They're great. I'm sure you all know Open House New York holds year-round public programs, including the annual Open House New York Weekend Festival, which educate and engage us on the connections between quality of place and quality of life for all New Yorkers. So now let me tell you a little bit about how tonight is going to roll. In a moment, as I mentioned, I'm going to introduce Stanley to share his thoughts, insight, and work from the podium here. Then he'll be joined in a moderated conversation led by Mariana Mogalevich of Urban Omnibus. And then finally, Stanley and Mariana will be joined further by two other members of the creative team related to the book, publisher Kris Graves, who I mentioned, and map maker Larry Buchanan. And at the end, we'll have time for some brief questions from all of you. So that's the drill, a packed and rich night. Now let me tell you a little bit more about each of our guests and turn the program over to them. Stanley Greenberg is the author of Invisible New York, Waterworks, Olmsted Trees, Springs and Wells, Codex New York, Time Machines, and Under Construction. He has had solo exhibitions at the Art Institute of Chicago and the MIT Museum. His photographs have been exhibited at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Whitney Museum of American Art, and were included just last year in the Brooklyn Artists Show at the Brooklyn Museum. He is a lifelong resident of Brooklyn. We are at the, yes, we love that at the Center for Brooklyn History. Mariana Mogalevich is editor-in-chief of Urban Omnibus, the Architectural League of New York's publication. A writer and historian of architecture and urbanism, she is the author of The Invention of Public Space, Designing for Inclusion in Lindsay's New York. Larry Buchanan is a reporter and graphics editor for the New York Times. The stories he reports use a variety of visual forms, maps, charts, diagrams, photographs, video, all to explain the world better than words can alone. He also teaches journalism and map making at Columbia University and lives in Red Hook. And finally, Kris Graves is an artist and the founder of KGP Monolith, which collaborates with artists to create limited edition publications and archival prints that address issues of race, identity, equity, gender, sexuality, and class. In his work as an artist and as a publisher, Kris elevates the representation of people of color in the fine art canon and creates opportunities for conversation about race, representation, and urban life. So we are so proud and excited to have and host you all here tonight. Please help me welcome first Stanley Greenberg to the podium.
Thank you. Where are my notes? They've actually been stolen. Okay, I'll do this without notes. Really? Okay, I'm going to forget all the people I want to thank, but I will try. Thank you, Marcia, and Center for Brooklyn History, and thank you, Open House New York. Thank you, Mariana, Kris, and Larry for being part of the team and being here today. And thank you to the Architectural League, New York State Council on the Arts independent arts grant, which paid for a lot of the production of the book. So, what is this project? It's art, it's documentary, it's conceptual, it's political, it's all of those things, and hopefully we'll get to talk about that a little bit later. But as Marcia said, I did the book in 2003, and I had a lot of cooperation from New York City DEP. They basically gave me the run of the system, I'd say like 1998 to 2001. And then when it was time to publish the book, they tried to stop me. And I spoke to a famous First Amendment attorney. He offered to help. I went back to DEP. I said, go to hell. And they backed off, and then they bought 250 copies. So what can I tell you about that? But after I published the book, I thought, okay, I'm not really done with this, but I'm going to leave it alone for a while. So I did a bunch of other projects, some of them about New York, some of them about other places, books that Marcia mentioned, a book about high energy physics and a book about architecture. But I kept thinking about the water system. And pretty much any time I'm in New York and walking around and on the street, I wonder what I'm looking at. Like, I can be really annoying to walk around with. My friends are nodding yes. But they also want to know what they're looking at too, and I often have the answer. And when I don't let go of it. So I do the research, and I usually figure it out. And some of the things in the book are things that I spent a couple years trying to figure out. So let's look at some pictures. So when I started doing the finding of places, I decided to make a map. And what you can see in this map is a lot more than what you see in DEP's map. Each of the different colored dots represents a different part of the system. So the green dots are all of the Croton system, Croton water supply system. The red dots are what they used to call the Catskill system, and the orange dots are what they used to call the Delaware system. The yellow dots are what used to be the Brooklyn system, which is pretty much completely forgotten now. There are a few other oddball dots, like the pink ones, which are high-pressure water supply pumping stations, which don't exist anymore. And all the gray spots are sewer pumping stations, and the black ones are wastewater treatment plants. So these are all different, these include all different kinds of typologies of what the system is made of, and I'll show you some of those in a few minutes. This is a closer view of that same map. So I've been using this map myself and building it for 15 or 20 years, but I've made it public now. So that QR code will get you the map. If you may take a picture of it if you like, or I have cards that I can give you at the end that have the same QR code. But when we started working on the book, I thought, well, this is not really it's a very useful map, but it's not the nicest map to look at. So I met Larry at one of my open studios, and we thought we could work on something together. And that's this. So this map is part of the book. It's a fold-out, a separate sheet, and it's got two sides. It's got the same information. Oh, my notes. Okay. I'm just going to pass this around. I'm not going to talk anymore. Okay. I didn't leave anything out. Okay. Okay. And again, this map is a two-sided map, so there's the city side with more. You can hear me, right? I feel like I'm standing near the mic the right way. Okay, good. Okay. So this map is helpful because it lists everything on one sheet. But if you're out in the field and you really want to find something and you're looking at this on your phone, it will give you the right corner to find everything there. The few exceptions to that are probably some of the way north orange and red dots that are shafts in the middle of the forest behind fences. But other than that, you can find pretty much everything on this map. So what are the different typologies that make up the system? I think we know what this one is. The dams are what create the supply. And many of the reservoirs also have spillways, which are sometimes part of the dam and sometimes separate. The city has to make sure that water gets back into the rivers that they destroyed so that there's life downstate and downriver. So this is how the water gets back into the river. The tunnels, that's funny. The tunnels that bring the water to the city were first built in the 1840s, and they're almost done now. We'll talk about that later. But the old Croton, which is what this one is from, had these ventilation towers, and you can walk almost the whole length of the aqueduct now. It's a state park. You can walk it in the Bronx, where some of it's a city park, but from Westchester north to Croton Dam, it's a state park. So you can see all of these and their wonderful graffiti. This is a ventilation tower from City Tunnel number 3, the one that they're still building. That's in Brooklyn, in East Williamsburg. There are gatehouses. This one's in the Bronx, in Westchester, just north of the Bronx border. There's a system I'll talk about a little bit later called the Jamaica Water Supply that's now closed. That was a groundwater supply, so that's a well. This is actually a twofer. In the distance, you can see Highbridge Tower. That's the only remaining I guess that's the only remaining water tower in the city. And this little door right here at the front is a shaft for City Tunnel number 1. And of course, Highbridge. This is a sewer pumping station that's right on Hamilton Avenue, not that far from here. and a wastewater treatment plant. So there are other typologies, but these are the main ones that we'll be looking at. So the Croton Dam is, the original Croton Dam is underwater in Croton Reservoir now. This dam was built because the city needed more supply. When the Croton Reservoir was first built, I think there was a huge celebration, and I think the mayor said, this will last us for, I don't know, 50 years. And within a few years, they realized they had to start building more reservoirs. So this is inside the Croton Dam, in a space that they insisted didn't exist. But I had worked for a little while in the DEP archives, preserving some of their drawings that were 150 years old and hadn't really been touched in almost that long. Also inside. So this was both a pigeon rookery and a poison ivy trap. I got to see both. This is the West Branch Reservoir, in the days when things used to freeze. So all these older reservoirs make up usually what's about 10% of the water supply, and the less high quality. And you probably heard the DEP commissioner the other day saying that the water is getting worse because of all the road salt. These reservoirs are in much more populated areas than the reservoirs upstate, further upstate. The East Branch Reservoir. And the Croton Falls Reservoir. This is another spillway. Most of the Croton reservoirs were in bad enough shape that they had to all be somewhat rebuilt. So that's why, even though this reservoir is originally from probably about 1880 or 1890, it looks more modern. So, and there was, when I started looking for these sites, there were a couple of people at DEP who decided that they would help me even though nobody had given them permission to. And one of them took me to see this site. It's a gatehouse between two other reservoirs so that they could balance, they were each in slightly different watersheds, so they could balance the amount of water in each one. And there were wooden doors that went up and down. I think you can just still see one in the middle in those arched spaces. But that hasn't been used in probably 50 or 60 years. But I never would have found it. It was over a ridge, and I mean, just finding it was like finding some kind of hidden castle. So the Croton reservoirs were the first ones, and the Croton aqueduct was the first. There's a little bit of it left. I don't know if they've turned it off, but for a long time after the rest of it was shut down, it still supplied Sing Sing prison with water. But you can actually go see this in Ossining. There's a bridge, it's called the Double Arch Bridge, that crosses over a bit of a valley. And the Friends of the Old Croton will take you in there on their tours. It didn't have lighting when it was used for water supply. So, and this is High Bridge, which I'm assuming all of you have seen, and you can walk over now. There was a debate about what to build to bring the water from the Bronx to Manhattan. And they talked about using a tunnel, they talked about building a low bridge, and they talked about a high bridge. And John Jervis, who had designed the system, pushed for the high bridge because he thought people need a monument to remind them that the water system is something they built. So it was the most expensive solution, but I think it was the best one. And Highbridge Tower, which is right next to Highbridge, was built, as were the other water towers, because the amount of pressure in the pipes in the aqueduct from upstate was not enough to bring water to the highest elevations of Manhattan. So at night, water would get pumped up. There used to be a big tank at the top of this water tower. The water would get pumped up, and then you could use gravity to feed those upper areas during the daytime. But that's why we all have water towers and tall buildings now. The pressure would only take the water up about 6 stories, I think. So another great building from the new Croton system was the 135th Street Gatehouse, which is right across from City College. This is now a performing arts center. So you can see the basic shapes, but there are no pipes anymore. And Jerome Park Reservoir in the Bronx, which is often empty. I guess they do have to clean it a lot, and it's not that deep, but that's the only reservoir that's of use in New York City now. This is from the reservoir that's not in use. This is in Central Park. So I want to talk a minute about the Brooklyn system. So New York built its system 1837 to 1842, and soon after that, Brooklyn decided that it had to build a system too, because it was a separate city, of course. And it dug a series of wells and used a bunch of ponds, mostly along a spine of what's now Sunrise Highway. So whenever you see little bits of water along there, they were probably part of the Brooklyn system, which Robert Moses traded Nassau County for so that he had property to build his highways. He didn't own them, but he traded them anyway. So this is the Wantagh Gatehouse, which you can't see anymore because it's covered with plywood, and also poison ivy. I couldn't figure out who was responsible for it in the 1990s, so it was one of the few places I had to climb a fence to get into. And Ridgewood Reservoir, which maybe some of you have been to, was the terminus of that system, although there was a water tower in between where the Brooklyn Museum and the main branch of the library is now. But the reservoir was the main holding reservoir, and that is the intake from the aqueduct. It's still there. I don't think you can usually go down there, but sometimes there are volunteer groups that do cleanups, and you can get down there. So, okay. So once the water gets to the city, it has to get distributed. So there are 3 tunnels. Tunnel 1, 2, and 3. Tunnel 3 was started in 1970, and they're still working on it. This is a place that was part of tunnel number 1 that's no longer there, but it was actually this really bizarre device that let someone sit in a capsule and go down the shaft to where the tunnel was and turn off the water to Brooklyn. They never used it. They were not happy about, I mean, I don't know why they didn't want me to photograph it, because they tore it down a couple of years later, but I managed to get in just in time. So the Catskill system is probably one of the reasons that Brooklyn decided to become part of New York, because Brooklyn was running out of water. Suffolk County wouldn't let us have any. New Jersey wouldn't let us have any. New Jersey wouldn't let New York have any. So they started looking upstate, and they had decided on building a reservoir in the Catskills. And people in Brooklyn thought, okay, we need that water too. So The vote, as you probably know, was very close to become part of New York, and a lot of people think this was what pushed it over the edge. So this is the Ashokan Reservoir Gatehouse and spillway. After the Ashokan and the Gilboa were built, the city needed more water, so they went west into what they called the Delaware system. This is the Cannonsville Dam, or I should say the Cannonsville Spillway. Most of the later dams were earthen. They're not, you almost don't even see them. It's the spillway that's the more structural part. And a closer view. This wasn't finished until the 1950s, and they had a delay because there were no materials available during World War II. So there's one typology that we didn't talk about is a stilling basin. So when the water comes down the spillway, there's a lot of pressure, and it would basically tear up the river that it's going back, or the stream that it's going back into. So in some places, they would build these areas where the water could just come down and kind of quiet down before it went back into the river. So that's up at the top, that's the water that you're looking at. The water is coming from behind where I was photographing. There's another tunnel between the Gilboa and the Ashokan reservoirs that's, I think it's still the longest tunnel. And then it comes out into the Esopus Creek. And this is right where it comes out into the creek. And then it just stays in the creek before it gets to the Ashokan reservoir. This is right off the highway. You can actually go see that easily. This is at the New Croton Dam. This is where the water gets mixed from the various reservoirs so that it tastes better. And the last stop before the water gets to the city is the Hillview Reservoir. And one of the things that's interesting about the system that makes it so hard to describe is that there's so many redundancies, places that do 2 or 3 places that do the same thing. So the water comes into this reservoir, but it could also go through this tunnel underneath the reservoir and skip the reservoir. So they were pretty smart about that. And that's really why they're building the 3rd tunnel, so that they can go back and look and see what's wrong or right about the first 2 tunnels. Now we are in the 3rd tunnel. I went here first. For 1 year in the 1980s, I worked for DEP and went around the city a lot with the commissioner to wherever he had to go. And we once went to this incredible muddy hole under Van Cortlandt Park that felt like a science fiction movie. And this is what it looks like now. It's the valve chamber of the tunnel. There are about 13, I think there are 13 valves like this, which are like 8 feet in diameter. They're enormous. And you feel like you're going into a missile silo now. And I've been in a missile silo. So this is part of that valve chamber also. There's another valve chamber, a much smaller one, underneath Central Park. This is what the tunnel looks like before the concrete is poured. Tunnel is dug by a tunnel boring machine, which is like a giant drill. In the old days, they used dynamite. This is much neater. And that's the concrete form. Okay. Newtown Creek is the newest wastewater treatment plant in the city, and I think it's the one with the biggest capacity. I'm not sure about that. It has the most stainless steel on the outside. So there are other little odd places. Like one of the things that was interesting to me was that it seemed like no matter how many places I found, there were more. And I had always heard about something called the Manhattan Grit Chamber. And I thought, what even is that? And it turns out it's the place, there are these big metal screens in there, and the wastewater goes through there, and that's where the mattresses are caught and the body parts, and they actually they go fishing there sometimes and catch live fish. So this feeds to the wastewater treatment plant on Randall's Island. And then there's also a Bronx one of these. So, I mean, you would walk by there and you just have no idea what it was, but I managed to find it and photograph it. And that's another wastewater treatment plant. This one is in Jamaica. The first two plants that the city built were Coney Island and Jamaica because that's where people were seeing the sewage where they went swimming. And North River. So I want to show a few more of the typologies that I talked about. So these are the old Croton ventilators. And these are parts of the Brooklyn system. So the bottom middle one is on Conduit Boulevard. You would just have no idea if you were walking by what you were looking at, but those little standpipes are part of the old aqueduct. And the building on the upper right, that's in Massapequa. If you're on Long Island Railroad, you'll go right by that. These are parts of the New Croton system, including the bottom right is inside the Central Park Gatehouse just to the left of it. The door there doesn't close that well. You can squeeze your phone in and take a picture. These are some of the shafts. So the tunnels around the city have shafts every mile or two. And some of them are marked by structures, as you can see, and some of them are just little doors in the sidewalk. The second row from the bottom, second picture from the left, is just in the sidewalk on 6th Avenue and 50th Street. I mean, there's no markings. In fact, Tunnel 3 shafts, which we'll get to in a minute, all used to say City Tunnel number 3, shaft 18B or 14B. And then after 9/11, all of that information was ground off. So you just have to know where they are now. This is tunnel number 2, which goes from the Bronx and then across the Sound to Queens, and then it meets tunnel number 1 in Fort Greene Park. And these are tunnel number 3. You'll probably start to see these now that you know what they look like. There are a bunch of them downtown Manhattan. There's one on 4th Avenue and Sackett Street in Brooklyn. A few of them have been turned into playgrounds, but they don't say why they're there. But they have these funny metal towers, so you kind of know. The bottom left one is right in front of, bottom row left picture, that's right in front of Hudson Yards. So, okay, this is the Jamaica water supply, which was the last private water supply in the city. It was all groundwater, which, as you can imagine, was not drinkable. So the city bought the system in around 1962 or so and shut it down and connected everyone to New York City water. And since they shut it down, everyone's basements there have flooded because the drinking water was pushing the water table lower, and now it's coming back up to where it was before. And a lot of those neighborhoods are below ground already, below sea level. These are some sewer pumping stations, and the one right in the middle of the grid is a stormwater retention tank, which is another issue we could talk about. We could talk for hours. More sewer pumping stations. You might recognize the one on the top in the middle. That's on Ocean Parkway around Avenue V. Most of the station is underground, but that's a little ventilation tower for it. And there is my information and Urban Omnibus's information and Larry's and Kris's. And there are maps that we can talk about. Thank you. Shall we? All right. Two choices of tap water.
Two choices of tap water, two choices of seats. So much to talk about.
Yeah.
So I was just reminiscing watching this the first time that we worked together, maybe like 8 years ago on a project for Urban Omnibus that was a series of infrastructural mysteries.
Yeah.
I think for about a year, you would send us a photograph from your walks and investigations over the course of the year. And we'd get a photograph and, it would be something like this, piece of broken down sidewalk edge. And then, we talk about it and it would turn out, this is actually the edge of former Croton Reservoir in Central Park that was decommissioned, and all you can see is this trace.
Yeah.
Or here are these strange discs in the middle of nowhere that look like a gas storage tank that got cut off, at the knees, and lo and behold, it's a whole alternative decommissioned private water system in Jamaica that's still there and not doing anything. And I think, something that's like, why is there a railing in the middle of this park? I don't remember which one it was. Oh, well, that's actually exactly a shaft, like a city tunnel number 1 shaft entrance. Anyway, I say that it was a lot of fun, and every time, there would be this incredible image that was just such a combination of something absolutely banal and yet so powerfully compelling and mysterious and rich. So it's exciting to see some of those photos in the book and in the presentation, and to be reminded, as everybody has been told and has seen that everything. So I thought that I would study up for this conversation, and then said, why bother? I am not going to review my dates for the various systems. But so, I think, where to start. Maybe, thinking about all of these mysteries in plain sight and getting, as we talk a little bit into some of the how and some of the, big picture. Maybe we could start by talking a little bit about the shifts over the course of time in the project from the first book to the second.
Sure.
And even I think in the chronology that you've sort of shown us, you've talked about really moving from a position of total access and knowledge to having to work blindly in a way, and making sense of things that are in plain sight, but under a sort of shroud of secrecy. So I think it would be great to talk just a little bit about your methods and how you did it.
My madness. Actually, I'm really glad you asked that, because one of the things that I didn't catch when I didn't have my notes was talking about the idea of visual literacy. And it was kind of an interesting coincidence. At the same time, DEP was not letting me into anywhere after they had, and I had become much more interested in what are the things that are right out in front of you that you don't know anything about. So, I mean, and I've come across so many of those and had to go back and research. And, at this point, it's funny, I'm a birder, and you get to a point where you recognize a lot of birds and you think, okay, that one I don't know, so that's something. And the same thing happened to me with the infrastructure. I can pretty much tell you that I'm looking at something that's part of the water system or the gas system or the electrical system, but I know if I don't know what it is. And then I have to go find it, or find out what it is. But, looking for the tunnel shafts, I used so many different kinds of research, from old guidebooks to city planning documents to community board minutes, and eventually just pieced it together. And that was why the map was so important. Like, how do you know what you have until it starts to make sense? Like, the tunnel goes in this direction and you're missing the things in the middle. So you go look for them. And sometimes that's finding it on a map, and sometimes it's walking that back and forth. I remember looking for, there's only a few sewer pumping stations in Manhattan. Most are in the lower lying areas in Queens, well, all other 4 boroughs, but more near the shore. And there's one on Canal Street, and there's one that's listed as New York Public Library. And I must have walked the block of 40th Street between 5th and 6th Avenue 30 times on 30 different days before I finally realized, oh, it's right there in front of me. So my method is a combination of wandering around and going to the library and getting on the internet to do research. And you get obsessed, or it doesn't happen. So obsession is definitely an important part of my method.
One of the things that's so notable there, thinking about this survey of our infrastructure and also the passage of time, which is something that maybe we can get to in a little bit, is just seeing the incredible evolution before our eyes in the photographs, right? From a system that is visible, present, monumental, the story of the High Bridge, right? Like, you've got to make it high and make everyone see it,
Monument.
to this really obscure and punctuated and like inscrutable system in a way. And there's a way that we can really clearly trace in the photographs a real shift from a sort of monumental public landscape of water to something that operates differently.
I think it was the Cold War.
Yeah?
Yeah, I mean, everything before that, some things are more ornamental and some are less, and some are more monumental and some are less. And a lot of that had to do with what's the function. Like a gatehouse can be an interesting small building, a dam can be an interesting big structure. Excuse me. But a tunnel shaft doesn't necessarily have to be much to look at. But they were never really hidden. And then with the third tunnel, which, I mean, since I started building it in 1970, I believe the design work started at the very least in the early 60s, maybe the late 50s. And it does look like you're entering a missile silo where you can even go in. Mm-hmm. The place in Van Cortlandt Park where the valve chamber is kind of a curved stone wall with some parking spots in front of it, and a stainless steel door that's probably a few inches thick, and there are a few vents there in the wall. The one in Central Park, which you can go look at, it's on the 79th Street transverse. If you walk in from Fifth Avenue, look on the south side of the road, there's an enormous stone wall with, again, some stainless steel doors and some maintenance covers in the sidewalk. And that's all there is. There's no marking of any type. It doesn't say DEP shaft chamber, nothing like that. So I think the let's hide everything came with the Cold War.
Huh. Interesting. I mean, I guess I'm inclined to read it, maybe a little bit differently, that there's a hide everything, and then there's just maybe not the desire to do that work of advertisement. I'm thinking about the new third water tunnel parks that you mentioned and that we saw a couple of, right, where you have actually these somewhat bizarre but new investments of these strange mid-block parks. I don't know if folks have come across any of these, like what is there one on around 4th Street, one sort of off of Lafayette downtown, that are just like strange, flat, couple of benches, like not much to speak of, right. No sign, and this, maybe now we will all notice the shaft. I didn't know until we last talked that that's what they were. But anyway, point being that this is this massive system, and in the case of the third water tunnel, I did, look it up, right? Like largest capital construction project in New York City history.
That's right.
$6 billion, and not a sign, right, to sort of declare what's happening here. Right. So I guess I'm saying this not, to gripe, but maybe to come back a little bit to the question of visual literacy and what it sort of means both to design and to understand in the landscape the presence of this massive, expensive, complicated, life-sustaining system as it sort of registers in our daily lives?
Well, I think it's important for us to be able to engage with it. It's public space, it's public infrastructure. We paid for it, we use it every day. If we know what it is, we care about it. If we don't know what it is, then, who cares what happens to it? And I think that's a big mistake on DEP's part to make it so secret. We want to know what makes the city work, what makes our lives possible here. And I don't know why they're so secret. It's not like you could go down into a shaft and turn off the water. It's very secure. So yeah, I mean, and you go to those parks. I think the reason that those couple playground parks, whatever we want to call them, they're not really parks.
Lots.
I think the only reason they exist is because those communities insisted that they not remain vacant lots with a couple of metal shafts in them, because the one on 4th Avenue is like that now, and the ones in Williamsburg are like that. Some of them are just right on the sidewalk, so it's not like they didn't need to tear down a building to take the property to build it. But I think that's about the community. I don't think it's because they decided to be nice.
Right. So what I don't know. I mean, it's like kind of an unfair question or to put you on the spot about this, but I
Oh,
don't
go
think.
ahead.
But I don't think so, right? I mean, I think Marcy even brought it up at the beginning. Like the work. It's documentary, but sort of not. It is, It is aesthetically, beautiful and satisfying.
Right.
It is also conceptual. I always find it, interesting to think about as, in a way, this municipal project that didn't have a commissioner, right?
Right.
DP didn't ask for it. They said, actually, don't do it. So I don't know. I would love to hear a little bit about, in a way, the motivation or sort of like how you see or what you want for the work, going into the world, and how you sort of think about that project and its value going forward.
Okay. I mean, all the projects I do because they're interesting to me, and that always has to be the first part. If I'm not interested in the subject, then I'm probably not going to photograph it. And I might not have been interested in it last year, and then I could be next year. So I wouldn't be able to predict to you what the next project would be. But they become, I mean, to me, I don't think of them as documentary projects. And, it probably doesn't matter in the long run what I think of them, because other people are going to take away whatever they want to take away, and that's fine. They're definitely done in a documentary style, but to me, they're not documentary as much as conceptual. I mean, this was much more of a project about how much of this system can I figure out on my own without their help? Can I build a map? Can I find every sewer pumping station just by doing my own research? And here we go back to the word obsession. I mean, that's sitting at a map. I mentioned this when I talked the other day. I rehearsed this in Manhattan, and I brought the real show to Brooklyn, by the way. Robert Caro talks about turning every page when he's doing research. And I think of that a lot, too. Like, I've looked at the most obscure documents, hoping that there might be some reference to where shaft 13B is, or, and I mean, I guess I enjoy that, or I wouldn't be doing it, but it really is it's a research project, almost in the way that you'd be writing a history of something, or a journalism project. But also, there was something else I wanted to say about that, and I can't remember what it is.
Well, while you're thinking about
I'll
it,
come back
maybe
to it.
one last related
Okay.
question, and then we should have Kris and Larry join us and talk about the map. But maybe along those lines, and thinking about it as a history project, I also can't help but sort of think, not to put it in the documentary box, about or speculate on the value of the images in 100 years, in a way. And I'm thinking also about other work that you've done recently, like the photographs of Frederick Law Olmsted's trees, and thinking about these things and looking at them after a certain amount of time, or rephotography projects, looking sort of close to this project, right, at the current sites of former springs and wells in Manhattan.
Right.
So I think there is something really interesting, both marking the passage of time, but also marking for us a certain passage of time.
Right. Well, I mean, one of the things that I always think about in New York is how there's so many layers. And I'm always sort of amused when somebody wants to make a memorial to something, and there are plenty of good reasons to do that, but if we did that every time, then there'd be one 5 feet from the next one and 5 feet from the next one. That would be the whole city. But what I'm often interested in photographing is the evidence of what was there before. So it's kind of memorializing something without building something. It's more what the picture shows or the text that goes with the picture. I mean, I've been photographing all of the Dutch houses in Brooklyn, which I did first mostly to see if I could get to them all in a single day on my bicycle, which I did. And there were 13 at the time, and there are now 12. And then it just didn't occur to me until, I don't know, a little while later when I was looking at the pictures. Brooklyn was the biggest, there were more enslaved people in Brooklyn than anywhere else in the North. So most of these houses, or all of them, were built by enslaved people. So it went from being a project about, like, let's just go find the Dutch houses, to these are places that are like as powerful evidence of slavery in Brooklyn as you could have. So the pictures by themselves don't mean as much as the pictures with the text. And I find that often I need to include the text. Like the text that James Rule Smith wrote for his Springs and Wells is fantastic. I can't do better than that. So the book includes his text and his pictures and just my new pictures. I didn't add any text. And they're like 120 years apart. And there are a few springs that you can still find. You know, when I did the book called Codex, I walked every block of Manhattan. And that was kind of where I started seeing all these little bits of infrastructure that I wasn't always aware of. And that kind of pushed me in the direction of this project. Because after I had walked every block, I thought, well, where else can I walk? And then I started walking the routes of the tunnels. So I could walk across the Bronx and walk across Queens and walk across part of Brooklyn. So walking has become a much bigger part of my practice than it used to be.
So maybe this is a good segue in a way to ask Kris and Larry to join us. And I wonder if we can get the map up behind us as well, speaking of walking and identifying again.
Have a seat.
So we have Larry Buchanan, map maker, visual journalist, maker of the Waterworks map, and Kris Graves, publisher, Kris Graves Project of this book, and photographer as well. The book is beautiful as object in its own right, the map as well. And the map is an incredibly rich and dense visual demonstration of this process in its own right. Maybe we could talk a little bit about the idea to do it in the first place, about how some of the choices that that you both made.
You want to start?
No.
It was a real pain in the ass to fit on one piece of paper. There are 481 individual points on the map. And, you know, for me, it actually took me quite a number of months to figure out how to fit it all onto one sheet. But I think that is the value of it, is seeing it all in one place. And it kind of echoes what Stanley's been talking about visual literacy. Just that this idea that there can be this whole hidden world around you and that we can actually map that for you and give you this kind of document. And in that way, too, it's like a record of your journey in some way to kind of fill in these literal dots. And so
when I look at it and think, how did I go to all those places? I'm stunned.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, years and years and years, and just getting all of them on one piece of paper was a very big challenge, because the system is so large, and because it's so vast, and because you covered so much ground. And so for me, it was a real honor to try to figure that out visually, and also provide, just a record of like what government does, what it
Right.
builds, what these things are, and that they are in physical locations that if you open your eyes, you can kind of see it around you.
And for me, I mean, I thought, okay, there needs to be a map in this book. I don't know how to do that. And then Larry kind of showed up and said, hey, we should work on something together. And I thought, I have exactly the thing. So, but yeah, I was like, each time we looked at a new version, I thought, how are you going to get it all in there? But you did.
And it also went from being part of the inside of the book into being its own separate object
That's right.
at some point as
You're
well.
right.
I mean,
We originally
wanted
thought-
to have it in there, but then everything about this book is like it's a tritone black and white offset book. So having a color map would produce, it would cost way more. So we just didn't. Having a separate map that was shrink wrapped within was a less expensive option than printing it in the book. Actually,
It also just wouldn't fit on those pages.
Right.
Yeah,
We would have had to have many, many, many more pages of map.
Yeah.
I mean, like a super fold.
Yeah.
I'm curious, Larry, and the answer might be no, but for those also in the audience not familiar, you've recently been making some really incredible, complex New York City maps. Most of you may have seen last year for the New York Times an incredible visualization of the borders of city neighborhoods.
Or lack thereof.
Or lack thereof, exactly.
Fuzziness.
And more recently, looking at the tight squeeze and lack of fit to put the city's trash. So I say that as you are, like, in a way, have a subspecialty in squeezing very, very dense concepts, material into legible, accessible visual forms. I don't know if there's more, that you want to say about that, or how, I don't know, how we might look at those projects together. But I'm also curious, thinking about the other one, part of it is, all right, we've got these data sets and we've got to squeeze it in. But there's always questions of ambiguity, what belongs, what doesn't, choices that need to be made, not just to get everything on a printable page, but to render the system legible. And so I'm curious if what those might have been in this case.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the projects start from a similar premise as Stanley, which is that there is all this stuff that's around us that we can't see, and if we could only kind of try to visualize it in some very particular form, that you would be kind of like shocked with new eyes when you walked out into the street.
Right.
And so this neighborhoods project that we produced was 50,000 New Yorkers. Many of you, probably maybe some of you, are in the data set. You submitted what you think the boundaries of your neighborhood are, and we published them in aggregate with everybody else's, and everyone in New York thinks that they are correct. And then when you put them all on one map, it turns out nobody is, which is a very humbling thing or should be for all of us. But I think in the case of this, in the case of neighborhoods, in the case of trash, again, it's about this idea of trying to put it all in one spot so that we can conceptualize it with our eyes at once. And I think that that's what the map does. It's what Stanley's book does. It's what many of these kind of projects try to do, to say that all these little parts make up this bigger thing that you can't see at once unless we visualize it as such. And I think that kind of parts and whole really help us try to, get our minds around these things that are often too big to get our minds around.
And also doing that in print, right, with something that you can wrap your hands around, whether it's the map or also maybe we can talk about the book as object and what it means to be able to, in a way, collect and hold on to the system, right? There is a Google map. We could, go scan the thing, follow it, but there's something very, very different about this record, and in a way, this field guide, right, to our infrastructure.
And the book is so much different than the original version, which was basically one picture per page, all the pictures the same size. And this book goes into the different typologies that we talk about. Also, we made it so that you could open it up and it sits flat. So the single pictures are bigger, and then you have the various typologies that we talked about. So it's a totally different feeling.
And on my end, we wanted to make a book that had a large print in it, but also didn't cost a fortune to have that large print in it, so to use all the paper we could. That's why we have such small borders around our edges of these large prints inside the book.
Right.
We're just kind of maximizing paper. I mean, that's what we do as a press. We try to not have any waste, even though, no, as little waste as possible for the books we make.
Yeah.
So that's why these pictures are so big in this book. And of course, there's probably, I don't know, like 400 or so pictures in this book, actually.
Yeah.
It's a lot of plates to lay. And yeah, it's a lot. It's very different than the first book.
Well, that was really the point, too.
Yeah,
We didn't want to
of
make
course.
the same book. We wanted to make a new one.
Yeah, and it's beautiful. Look at that. It's like quite, and the printing came out really nicely, which is great.
Yeah.
And this cover, if you look really closely, is kind of has a, sorry,
It has ripples.
has ripples. It has these like kind of, I don't know. It's going to be very difficult to see that, but you'll see it on the table out there. I mean, it feels good, looks good, and our designer's insane for all this kind of text work that he figures out how to do and how to mess with the presses. I mean, it's very difficult to do this kind of stuff, and he makes the press work for it for sure.
I like to think, right, if the system won't build itself a 21st century monument post sort of curtain, that maybe this book is the monument to the contemporary system. But you've been publishing many photo books really focused on the city, really particular and idiosyncratic perspectives on a number of cities by different photographers, your own work as well. And I sort of want to ask, like, first of all, who prints photo books in 2025, right? What is, how do you see that relationship between actually the format of the book and in a way a kind of understanding and portrait of a city?
Well, that's a lot of different questions. That's at least two different questions. Who prints a book in 2025? Only an insane person. I mean, the things, they cost a lot of money, and it's very difficult to, make your money back or make a profit. I mean, I don't think we make books for profit. We make books because we really love the projects and we love the collaborations with artists. So as long as we don't, kind of lose our full shirt, then we're pretty much good on it. And we love to, be here and talk to people about the work. So we'll just keep making books. Whatever happens, we'll keep making them. And yeah, we have to. I mean, we've made over 100 now, so we're going to keep it going. And the second question was, what? I can only remember one thing at a time.
Why?
We can leave it at that. I mean, I think something about the form of the book and the form of the city, or what the book format can really do for that kind of understanding, field guide, or like particular portrait.
Yeah, it's hard to when you live in a place, it's very difficult to see it, I think, from an outsider's perspective. So usually a lot of the books we make are about feeling lost in a place, feeling lost in the city, even though you've lived there, are from there, and trying to think about how do you photograph that place. And it's a little different for Stanley. I think he's seen probably every single block, almost of the 5 boroughs, I would say, at this point, which is insane.
Not all 5.
So not all 5. Yeah.
Brooklyn, Manhattan. Yeah.
I know that you've walked from every single block of Manhattan.
Yeah.
Which is like, you've seen it all. So I saw the original, well, not the original Waterworks, but Stanley made a book many years ago named Invisible New York, which is, I think, like a classic photo book in general, and then a classic New York book. And that was many years ago. And I saw that, when it came out. And I knew that work way before we met, probably only... so long ago. So I always wanted to kind of meet Stanley, work with him, and kind of have a chance to see those large format pictures, really. I mean, I just wanted to see them. So
We'll just have to make the next one bigger.
yeah.
I was going to ask, are there candidates for Waterworks 3?
Oh my God. No,
Well,
different projects. Different projects.
I guess
is what we need.
the two different answers for that are there's so many other pictures that are not in this book, but we had to make selections, and I think we did the right thing. But also, I have been, over a long period of time, photographing water infrastructure in other cities. I'm actually going to Amsterdam in a couple weeks, and we'll spend a fair amount of time photographing water infrastructure there. And boy, do they have a lot of it.
And he will see every single block of Amsterdam.
Yeah, on a bike probably.
We have time for some questions from all of you.
Whoa, the hands shoot up.
Yeah, we'll just wait for a microphone to come around.
No.
Hello?
We'll share.
Don't leave, this is the good part.
Hello? Hello, can you hear me? Not front. I used to work for the Port Authority. I'm retired now, but I worked on tunnel number 3 as a project manager in Manhattan, and I was wondering if the shaft I worked on got photographed or got on the map. It was
I didn't quite hear the
the
question.
rotary of the Holland Tunnel.
She worked on the third water tunnel
She
and
wanted
wants
to know if the shaft
shaft
that she worked on is in the book. On water
Well,
tunnel number 3.
every shaft is in the book.
Did you get to visit
Which one were you on?
Tribeca community near the Holland Tunnel? The community asked
Oh,
that we
yeah, for
put a
sure.
park on top?
Yep.
Okay, well, anyway, that's something that I worked on. Thank you.
Tunnel number 3, right?
Yeah.
These are your tunnel number 3 pages if you want to see.
Who are we choosing?
Should I start?
Oh, okay.
This guy's right.
Got it. Right.
How you doing? I can answer the question of why the secrecy of water tunnel number 3. It's a cost. When I graduated from Brooklyn Poly in 1988, I got a job as a field engineer for the DEP, and I was in the Van Cortlandt Park chamber. My field office was up in Hillview.
Right.
And if you go up at Hillview, you'll know why it's a cost thing. Because if you go towards the reservoir, on the right, there's this beautiful building. It's a gatehouse, and it's ornated. It's got these beautiful bricks that goes up and this beautiful roof. On the left is poured concrete square of shaft B 1B, and that's the reason why. It was a cost thing. It was more of a cost thing than anything else that required them to. That's why you don't see any monuments or anything like they built with the first tunnel and the High Bridge and so on. It's money, and that's what it came down to.
I'm not sure I buy that, but
I was responsible for costs and all that.
gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
My question is a little different. It's looking at the system. As I understand it, all 3 of the tunnels are rather deep in the ground. Their penstocks are enormous. But
Tunnel 3 is much deeper than the other 2.
yes, and then the issue is how the water gets to the surface and into the lines and all the rest. It's my understanding that there are intermediate levels, very similar to what one would have in an electrical system with transformers. And you didn't really discuss that, and I thought it might be worthwhile to bring a little bit of that up here in terms of discussing how it vertically goes, and then, of course, how once it's gone vertical and gone up certain distances, it then goes into a network.
I can give you a general answer, but I'm an artist, not an engineer. So, yes, you can't just go straight from the water tunnel to your tap. So there are lots of intermediates, and there are some enormous water mains that are not really part of the tunnel, but they're large water mains, and then smaller water mains, and then the pipe that goes down your block, and then there's your street connection. But what I did find that I thought was interesting is I came across some maintenance covers that said Catskill Aqueduct. Like, for example, there's a few of them on the corner of Franklin Avenue and Lincoln Road, which is right near where I live. And I thought, well, that's not the tunnel. Why are those maintenance covers there? And I asked someone who used to work at DEP who said, yeah, they built some of the really big mains when they put in the Catskill Tunnel. So they just decided to label those part of the Catskill. So the mains, like when they're connecting up Tunnel 3 to the rest of the system, you'll often see after the shaft is built, then lots of blocks around it have a lot of construction going on because they're putting in new water mains. So the water mains are the intermediary, and then you get to the pipes on your block and then your street connection. I hope that answered the question. Okay.
Hey, hello.
Hi.
Thank you for your talk. What's the most emotional reaction you had to finding a piece of infrastructure?
The most emotional? Did you cry? Close. I may not be able to tell you the specific moment, but there were a few times where I thought, okay, I know there's something around here. And what I was saying before about recognizing things, it almost becomes a sixth sense. You start to feel like you're near a dam or a gatehouse. And I think, again, I can't remember specifically which, but that moment of discovery when it might have been one of those the gatehouse that I talked about that was between the two reservoirs that's not in use anymore. Like there's a kind of small reservoir and then a road that goes off, looks like to nowhere, and then a berm of soil on the right side. And the guy I'm with says, go up there. And I walk up, and there's this structure, like, how did this get here? So that kind of discovery is the most fun part.
And also the poison ivy.
That one didn't have poison ivy, shockingly.
Hi, my name's Cullen. I
Hi.
work as an infrastructure-focused tour guide, and my question is around experiential learning. So specifically, what are some of your ideas for the best way for people like this audience to experience for themselves? And then secondarily, a lot of your photographs, almost none of them include people, and it's not a critique. I'm just curious about
That's
how
okay.
you would incorporate like people who built and maintained it into the story of the infrastructure. Thank you.
Okay, the first part, how would you best experience the water system? Well, the QR code with the map will basically take you anywhere in the city. And I mean, you could walk the tunnels the way I did. Most of it is, walking the streets. If you really want to experience the aqueduct, I would say walk the route of the old Croton. And if you don't even want to go to Westchester, you can walk a bunch of it in the Bronx, and there are a few gatehouses. But also, I mean, if you walk around Jerome Park Reservoir and around Van Cortlandt Park, there are a lot of sites around there. And we haven't finalized it. I may do a walk with Open House New York of the sites around Central Park. So there's a bunch of different sites in one location, or one park, I guess. There are 3 or 4 shafts of City Tunnel number 1 in Central Park. There's 1 shaft of Tunnel number 3. There is the old reservoir. There are the remains of the first reservoir, which came before the one that's there now. Some of those are marked, and some of them are not. Some of the walls of the police station just south of the reservoir are made of the old reservoir. And going further back, geologically for sure, there are some springs and wells still there. And one of them is marked. It's on the west side, right near New York Historical Society. And if you look in the book, the Springs and Wells book, either the original or mine, there's a boulder at the north end of the park right kind of near the middle with a metal ring that used to hold a cup that people used to drink out of that spring. So I guess for a single place to find stuff, probably Central Park.
And then take your people on the 6 train up to Yankee Stadium, walk a little bit up Grand Concourse, make a left, and go straight across High Bridge.
That's right.
To Manhattan.
That's a great. And at each end of High Bridge, there are shafts, and then you'll be at High Bridge Tower in Manhattan.
We have time for one more question. One more.
Please take the mic.
Going to take it? Okay, sorry. This is slightly tangential. Do you know what the current daily usage of water in the city is?
I think it's 900,000 gallons. It used to be much higher. They sealed a lot of leaks and put in a lot of low-flow toilets and showers. So it's definitely, we've done a lot with conservation. Wasn't sure.
Say it. Do it.
So thank you. You have spoken of like groundwater being used in treatment plants, like such as in the 1950s. During your research, were you able to discover who built these plants and these structures and these bridges, being the time frame historically? And that leads into my second question. I'll be quick.
Wait, let me go back to the first. Did you say, did I figure out who built them?
Yeah, like you made a reference to like the Dutch houses, for example. During your discovery, you were able to find.
Oh, you mean the workers?
Right. Like.
Well, there were camps upstate. A lot of the workers were immigrants. The camps were also segregated, which I was very disappointed to read about. The families lived there. There were schools. The people in the community didn't like the workers, of course. A lot of the workers stayed there. In fact, if you ride around where a lot of the dams are, you'll find a lot of houses are built of stone or they have stone walls because the workers who worked on the aqueducts and the dams stayed there and got other kinds of jobs afterwards. So
And
that's actually a subject that I think a lot more research needs to be done about.
And lastly, I found a reference I found out a few years ago about, I believe it's Riverbank State Park, that was built above a treatment plant and it affected the community, and there was a lot of environmental justice and activism around it based off the community. So once again, with the mention of like treatment plants and groundwater in usage, that's not really safe.
So, okay.
Hold on, let me just finish real quick. New York City loves to proclaim itself as the best drinking water. So as a consumer, I just really want to know, is the water really safe from your experience and what you witnessed?
The first thing
Not
is,
to be political, I'm not trying to trap you or nothing.
I could keep answering, but the first thing is there is no groundwater that anyone drinks in New York. It's all from upstate. So we may have all kinds of pollutants in the ground, but that's not our drinking water. So we have, as much as I will criticize DEP, we have some of the best water in the world. I drink it every day. I don't drink bottled water, which is not only tested much less often, but is an environmental disaster. So I never drink bottled water except like if I'm in a place where there's only toxic water in another country. North River was built, there's a long story that I don't think I have time for, but it was built on a bunch of false assumptions that it wouldn't smell bad. And the community did not want the smell that was coming, so they demanded something in return, and that's why there's a state park there. That was built in the 1980s. So, but before that plant was built, raw sewage was going into the Hudson River. That was there were wastewater treatment plants all over the city, except for most of Manhattan. So that's why the Hudson was in such bad shape. And since that plant's been in, the water's gotten so much better that now the worms have come back to eat the pilings on all the piers.
All right. I think we can leave it there for this evening. We have books for sale and for signing up front after this, and I think just a round of applause for Stanley and Larry and Kris.